Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, and welcome to COP26, the European Union Side Events platform, live from the COP26 Blue Zone in Glasgow, Scotland. This session, Strengthening Indigenous Resilience, Ecosystem Restoration and the Role of Traditional Knowledge, is coming from you after what has been a really successful COP in terms of highlighting the needs for the voice of Indigenous people and women at the table during the negotiations for climate resilience and climate adaptation. I think we're here at a conference where a lot of us are at the last 1% of our battery, and I realize it is dinner time, so I'd like to keep this interactive for the people in the room. If any of you have got any questions, please just put your hands up and we'll get you a mic to answer them immediately, and that goes for anyone online as well. You have got a Slido participation tool, so if you need, you can put your questions in there and I will get them on my iPad here. I think it has been wonderful to be at this COP. It's been very lively, and this might be one of the last events at the COP, but it is also going to be great to have the last word for the women in the room. Today we're taking you on a journey around the room into the beautiful natural habitats of Russia and Scandinavia, Guyana, Colombia and Tanzania. I have the distinct honor of leading a conversation with these four absolutely wonderful, accomplished, innovative and passionate women, Valentina, Fanny, Loretta and Fiona. I think this is what we call a WANL, in the opposite version of a MANL, which there has obviously been enough of in our lifetime, so we're going for the full female panel this time, fittingly enough. I have heard time and time again that at this COP that Indigenous peoples are the key to making local communities climate resilient, and their traditional knowledge should shape our strategies towards a net zero world and restoration of ecosystems. But maybe what we have not highlighted as sufficiently is how different these communities are around the world, just how different their lives are, how different their feelings and experience of climate change is. And we know how urgent it is, but we also know what's already working for them. And we need to try and see if we can support these efforts to align with their strategies, enhance their abilities. And I, for one, want to open up a highway of communication between the global north, the global south, the Indigenous rural communities, and the cities. We're told we need to focus on their nature and their culture, but I feel like we can't separate Indigenous peoples from nature at all. I think we have to acknowledge that respecting nature is respecting Indigenous peoples, and I think we'll hear a lot more about that tonight. Clearly, it's not me you're going to be hearing it from, so I think we just need to get started. Ask plenty of questions, and I'll endeavour to give a fair amount of time for these, either in between the sessions or at the end. And if you don't hold back, if there's something you don't agree with or something you do agree with, let us know in the room by clapping or put your hand up and let's have a conversation. So, first up tonight, we're going remotely. We're driving further north, up to the complete darkness of winter into the northern Russia. Valentina Sovkina is joining us remotely. Hi, Valentina. She's a Sami activist from Lovodzero in Murmansk region, Russia. She grew up in a Kildin Sami-speaking household, and her grandparents followed traditional Sami occupations, including reindeer herding, fishing and hunting. She was chair of the Russian Sami parliament until it was closed by authorities, and since 2013, she's run Kola Sami Radio. According to Sovkina, the Russian Sami population in Russia is suffering a natural decline due to the small family size of modern Sami families. This is complicated, however, she states, by the lower social status of Sami and their corresponding economic insecurity, due to, in part, lack of support and social well-being initiatives for the Murmansk regional government. She remains one of the best-known Kola Sami activists. So, with no further ado, welcome, Valentina.
Unfortunately, I don't speak English, so I will speak Russian today. My people are spread across 4 countries, Finland, Sweden, Norway, and
В
Russia.
России проживает нас всего
In Russia,
1800
there are
человек.
only 1,800 of us.
На следующем слайде, next.
You'll see the next slide.
Сами России проживает на
You can see
территории
the Russian
Мурманской
Sami
области.
who live in the
Географически это
Murmansk
польский полуостров.
Oblast, which
И
is the
самый
Koly
большой
Peninsula.
район проживания Ловозерский, где я
Largest kind of
родилась.
concentration of
Нас
our people are in
проживает
Lovozero region,
около 900 человек.
where there are about 900 Sami living
Следующий
there.
слайд. Next. Для нас очень было важно определить
Very important for us,
для молодежи тему климата.
for
И
youth to look
мы
at climate
планировали,
change and
думали о
climate.
том, как донести до нашего народа
We were
те
thinking about how to
изменения, которые происходят сегодня
describe
в
the
мире,
changes to
на
our
нашей
people,
земле.
to how to
И
explain global
была
affairs
принята идея
to
создать
our
климатическую платформу
people, and
коренных
we
малочисленных народов
decided
для
to
обмена
adopt the Indigenous
информацией и
Peoples
создания
Climate Platform
потенциала и
for
практического
information
применения
sharing, capacity
традиционных
building,
знаний коренных народов.
and practical application
Мы
of
все
indigenous
знаем,
traditional
что
knowledge.
коренные народы, живущие на своих
We
территориях,
all know that
очень
indigenous people who
очень ценят
live on their
свою
lands
землю, потому что она их
value, place
питает,
great
она дает
value
им жизнь,
on
и
their lands
это очень
because the
важно для
land
нас.
feeds
И
them, it
общая
gives them
цель
life,
нашего
it's key for
проекта –
us,
это усилить понимание самской
and
молодежью,
the
взрослого
main
населения,
goal of our
феномена изменения
project is to
климата и влияние этих
explain
изменений
climate
на
change
жизнь
to our
общин
youth and our
наших коренных
population and
народов.
how climate change affects
Содействие вовлечению молодежи в
our
процесс
indigenous
принятия
communities.
решений, касающихся
And
адаптационных
young people
мер.
have to be
И
involved
для
in
этого
decision making
мы составляли
on
план
adaptation
адаптационных
measures,
мер, чтобы можно было
and we
понять,
have a
как
plan for that,
подготовиться
a
к
plan that
изменению
will help us
климата.
understand how to
Следующий, next.
prepare for climate change.
Next. И мы создали несколько видов платформ, то есть специально была продумана такая
that we considered and thought through.
Программа, которая бы могла показать информационную и образованную сторону. И, конечно же, нам хотелось,
that focused on the information sharing and the educational side of it.
Так и
We wanted to
платформа,
be
которая
a virtual platform,
занимается офлайн. То есть создали целую группу
and
для того, чтобы мы
for
могли
people to have a chance to meet
общаться.
offline in
Наши
real life.
партнеры,
Our partners,
на слайде, это Фонд самского
as you
наследия
saw from the
развития,
slides, are the Sami Heritage Development Fund, the Center for Support of Indigenous Peoples of the North, Info North, and
вариант, извините, пожалуйста.
I'm sorry,
Thank you, Valentina.
missed a step here.
Just the struggles that you've got up north, and I know that you have been doing a lot of work on making sure that climate change doesn't affect your nutritional value of the food that you can grow and eat. So would you tell us a little bit more about that, please?
Конечно, для нас очень важна тема питания, потому что
Yes, nutrition is key for us because our land gives us everything that we're born with. Sami people are called people of 8 seasons. We live according to nature's cycles, and as nature changes from winter to spring to summer to fall, and everything that moves in nature connected to deer, to fish, is connected to our cycles. And when we face climate change, the nature cycles are disrupted, and the process of preserving nutritional value in our food food is affected, our game and fish are affected, and it's key for us to understand what's happening in the world and how do we adapt to nutritionally. We understand that if deer is not getting the full nutrient value from its feed today, then our food will be impacted and will suffer in the end. Our plants are also adjusting to new cycles. When berries ripen too early and they're not getting enough sun, for example, and they become sour, they become unedible. So we have to adapt to those cycles as well. Climate change also affects the temperature of our waters when we're fishing. For example, before fish meat was tasty and firm, but because our waters in the lakes are warmer now, the fish is also becoming inedible. It's kind of boiling in this lake. So these changes in nature dictate our need to be ready for them.
Thanks, Valentina. I think it's interesting to hear because one of the things that you would have relied on in the past is your traditional knowledge, and that knowledge being ingrained in the seasons and the temperatures that you're expecting in nature. So how is that impacting how you work now that your traditional knowledge is being knocked off course a little bit, as it were?
К сожалению, мне не было слышно перевода, и поэтому только смею догадываться, какой вопрос прозвучал. На самом деле, то, что впереди я сказала на первый вопрос, да, наши традиционные знания, они всегда нам помогают выживать в условиях природы. И они передаются по наследству от родителей детям. Мы находимся как раз
between generations, from parents to children.
Живем в условиях урбанизации,
Today we're living during an age of urbanization.
Различных технологий, и, конечно же, все традиционное уходит на второй план.
And all traditional knowledge is moving to the background.
Своими традиционными знаниями. Наоборот, оно происходит внутри, по гациногенном уровне, когда ты понимаешь, что твой организм требует того питания, которое необходимо для тебя.
And our bodies dictate what we need nutritionally.
Потому что, как правило, обычно говорят, что коренные народы живут сегодня в условиях цивилизации, в домах,
surrounded by civilization,
машинами, мобильными телефонами,
and we're using mobile technology and cars, and yet
процесс принятия собственной
inside
жизни,
of us we have a different process of accepting life.
Своей земли, то у нас происходит
when we are torn away from our lands,
да, то есть организм начинает болеть. Поэтому очень важно,
our bodies suffer and break down, so it's very important.
Подход идет щадящий. То есть если приходится осваивать территории или, например, строить города, то обязательно
gradual transition to urbanization. So when cities are built,
по строительствам и по тому, что происходит у
we
нас
have to consider
изменения в мире и в стране.
The changes in our country and in our people.
Thank you, Valentina. And so what results are you thinking that you're going to get or achieve by creating a climate strategy, which I know that you've been working on with your people to try and adapt to what's happening right now? So what's the goal with that climate strategy?
А вообще мы, конечно, с нашим проектом мы ставили в первую очередь,
with our project, first and foremost, we were hoping to increase the knowledge of the people about climate change in general, and also about those measures and steps that we can take. We would develop those measures to adapt to the changes. When a person is equipped with knowledge, we think that they begin to compare and adjust to any changes much quicker, much easier. And of course, they would be able to plan. We would be able to plan ahead of time to the changes that are coming in the future. And according to this, with this, we certainly must have a good collaborative dialogue between the governmental agencies, the government itself, and our communities in preparation for climate change effects and ongoing work. So we would like to become direct participants of all the decisions made at a higher level.
Thank you, Valentina. We have a bit of a delay on the interpretation, which is why there is a wait sometimes. I appreciate your patience there. Thank you very much, Valentina. I hope to come back to you with questions from the audience later on in the session. But for now, we're going to move it right on into this room back here in Glasgow, where we're met with Fanny Kuru. She's the coordinator of Women and Family area of OPIAC and COICA councillor for the area of Women and Family. She's indigenous to the Uitoto of the Colombian Amazon, and she speaks that same language. She's of the Hitumagaro, is that correct? Hitumagaro clan, people of the sun, that means. So not only does she have a master's degree in political and international studies with a laureate thesis from the Universidad del Rosario, but she's also a specialist in senior state management from the School of Public Administration and a lawyer from the Universidad Santo Tomas de Aquino. She's a U.S. Department of State scholarship holder for training in processes of shaping the historical memory and cultural heritage. Fanny recently organized and led the Summit of Native Women of the Amazon Basin, a historic meeting that had the participation of more than 150 women from 9 countries. The result was a Women's Manifesto letter, which is presented here at COP26. So congratulations for that, Fanny. It expressed the need for women to be taken into account into the decision-making process on the conservation of the Amazon, and the need for women to receive the funds directly from the government. Her presentation will be on current financial mechanisms for women-led rainforest restoration. Among the donors supporting these processes is the Women's Fellowship Programme of Conservation International, with funding from the French government. Since she was a child, she's been a community leader in the fight for recovery and constitutional rights, as well as organizing training for indigenous peoples of the jungle. So welcome, Fanny. Thank you very much. And please go through your presentation.
Bueno, muy buenas tardes para todos, todas las que
Good afternoon, everyone. We're here representing 511 peoples regional to the Amazon basin. 9 countries are there included as part of this Amazon watershed. And about women and our key role that we play, well, day to day, we are there in the forests, helping, taking care of the territories, restoring them so that the Amazon is conserved. It's extremely valuable work, which I believe should be taken into account in these spaces, because it is a work that might seem insignificant, Nevertheless, it has a huge impact in the protection and conservation of tropical rainforest in the Amazon region. We can tell governments and NGOs that come to the Amazon region that that's a little work that is done, but that creates huge impact and that should be supported by them, by governments and NGOs. We have, moving forward, several initiatives for the protection of the territory. We are carrying out small projects, but again, that they generate huge impacts. Example, 69 projects by cuidadoras del Amazonas, by caretakers of the Amazon, are working with food sovereignty while restoring tropical rainforests. Also, we have a very small project known as savings cooperatives, and these are about bringing small resources to women in the rainforest so that they can start entrepreneurship activity to improve the quality of life of their communities. We also have a project of scholarships or endowment to help them preserve this tropical rainforest, and this is through CI, Conservation International. They're one of the ones who are promoting this presentation today or co-organizing it. So I believe that's what women need. Women from our region, we should be given spaces in areas such as, or spaces such as this ones. We cannot bring good solutions in terms of climate change if we cannot actively participate in these spaces. About a month, women from the 9 countries, more than 180 women came together in this space known as the Summit of Women from the Amazon Basin.
De hecho, enviamos una carta.
As a matter of fact, we wrote a letter and we submitted a letter to the organizers of COP26 in which we proposed that it's necessary to speak about the Amazon, but it's equally important to include women, particularly women that have the traditional knowledge needed to preserve the Amazon region. We cannot talk about conservation, protection, restoration, no deforestation if we don't take into account the true guardians of those forests, which are the indigenous women that live in those forests. As part of this event, or that event, we proposed, put forth that we were seriously concerned. Not just scientists feel concerned about the loss, or in this case, 17% of the tropical forests, the rainforests, are being lost in the rainforest. And there's a degradation of 7% of its forests. So this is very troublesome. And we said at that summit that we need to act now. We're working day to day to preserve the Amazon region, but it's also everyone's responsibility to protect it. Therefore, we must join efforts. We must push forward in the protection with very practical activities, exercises, with the support of women in their day-to-day activities. The activities that mitigate climate change effects, because they are the only ones that know how to run the ecological calendar of the area so that we can face all the different effects of climate change, which today in our forests is being lived and is affecting food sovereignty. There were many species that before were there and they are no longer there present. So how climate change is affecting ecosystems, that is strategic. That needs to be worked on. It is an urgent call from us, from indigenous peoples, women of the Amazon region, to join efforts, join knowledge, so that we carry out real actions, but now, to not wait any longer, not to wait for the Amazon to get that tipping point at that point of no return. But no, we need to act now. Studies say that if we get to that 20% level, it's possible that Amazon get to that point of no return, which would be grave, extremely serious, not just for us who live there, but for the planet, for life on the planet. Therefore, it's also urgent for the states, the governments of Latin America, particularly of those 9 countries, to adopt and sign the Escazú agreements, which are the only ones that recognize and protect the human rights of the defenders of those territories, because women, because we're defending our territories, are also being criminalized, persecuted, so they should also be protected. Effective mechanisms must be established against all forms of violence against women in those territories. And I believe that way we'll be able to move forward. And at that summit, we established 5 key strategic points to continue working as women from the Amazon basin to push forward in the creation of a fund for women, a fund that we can use to support our community projects, our local projects therein, and also to promote the participation, equal participation of women, to do follow-up to the climate change agenda, and to allow for the building of a network of women defenders of the Amazon region. We have several proposals thinking into the future, but we don't stop acting day to day to defend those territories.
Thank you, Fanny. Super exciting what you're doing, and I think it's wonderful that you're bringing this. We sometimes forget that there are security issues implied or involved with fighting for the rights and the securities of Indigenous peoples. So thanks for bringing that in. Tell me, you mentioned that the letter of the Summit of Indigenous Women was presented here at COP, and you mentioned what you told them you felt was necessary for a successful climate negotiation. Can you tell me, how has it been received, and what will be the further actions from that?
Bueno, el primer llamado es la participación efectiva.
Our first call is on effective participation. We have been saying to the Climate Change Office that women from the Amazon Basin want a dialogue with a team of the Executive Secretariat on Climate Change this month, in November. So a group of women came here from the Amazon Basin, which we explained our needs, but we want direct dialogue with them. However, we also would like to call on the governments. The programs aimed at saving the rainforests include direct participation of women who are guarding them, as well as to donors and NGOs that work with us. The idea is to join in help us play that role as the guardians, as protectors. We also request that our voices are heard everywhere. Our voices have been there for thousands of years, silenced, have not been heard. And now it's time to say, here, we are here and we're ready to work and we'd like to be heard.
Online, you can send in your questions via Slido, and for those of you in the room, feel free to just put your hands up. I know that there are a lot of questions roaming around for me, but we still have 2 more speakers to hear from. So I'm going to put my own questions on hold for now, and if anyone else wants to interject, just let me know. Thank you, Fanny. I hope to come back to you with more questions on that as well. But we're moving down south again. We're going to Guyana. Well, I mean, supposedly most things are down south from Scotland, right? So we're moving on to Guyana, who's joining us remotely. Loretta, welcome very much to COP26. It's nice to see you in person. Assistant Secretary and Treasurer at the National Taoshao Council, and I'm not sure I pronounced that correctly, so apologies if I got that wrong. She's of an Arawak nation. She's born and raised in Muritaro. She has one husband, 4 children, 2 boys and 2 girls, and 7 grandchildren. She's a Christian who's also a farmer, and she loves to read. And she grew up in the surroundings of nature, of which she learned so much. So she's really here as a current fellow of the Conservation International Amazon Women's Fellowship Program. Loretta's presentation will take us through restoration in Guyana, and she'll speak specifically about her project, restoration with native crabwood trees. So highlighting the importance of supporting women to lead the reforestation projects based in traditional knowledge and how we engage in this community. So over to you, Loretta. Just a second, Loretta. We don't have you on mic just yet, so we're just going to ask you to start again because we can't hear you. But we will hear you shortly if you unmute. There we go. That's it.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. 2021 challenges.
Yes. I said good night. Yes, good night and good afternoon. In Guyana, it's afternoon, and it's supposed to be good night day for you. And I'm happy to be on this program, taking you to the restoration, the Amazon, planting trees in Guyana. Yes, it has been something I always be around nature and see this going on. And as a leader in the village, a women's leader, and also I was a Tushao for the 2 consecutive years, a leader for the village. And I have observed that the knowledge of our traditional way of harvesting logs in the village has been deteriorating, and mostly it common in the commercial business with chainsaw and these things, right? So what I look at in our village and looking at within what climate change, I decide to make a move in replanting back some crabwood trees and some other hobby trees. Unfortunately, we had a setback with the flood in the village, and so we didn't get to source the rest of the trees, but we sourced the crabwood trees then, which we have 200 trees. We plant, the group, myself and the group, we plant 160 crabwood trees within the village. The crabwood tree is for us in nature. We use it for medicine purpose. We use the seed to get the oil. We process it. The oil we make could make soap with it. We make candle with it and other stuff that we use for ourselves. See, when the tree is full grown, and then it could use for lumber logs to make materials, which is one of the number 1 species within forestry in Guyana. And so it gave myself and my women's group said, okay, let us take this try as we get an opportunity to get some assistance from the Women's Fellowship Program in Amazon. And as we get this, so we go forward in planting the trees. See, what the trees do also, it grows very fast. Tree grows very fast. And also it have the broad leaves, it traps carbon. It is very essential. We see the tree as something very essential within our village and beyond, in Guyana at large. And so we look at how it will benefit us. The tree grows within 4 years, the tree start harvesting its fruits. So that will help implement, create jobs also, because the more trees we get, is the more we could harvest the fruits from the trees. You see, it's like it is hard to get people mindset to cope with it. Don't let us cut the trees. Let us use the trees for other purpose that it could use for. Because we could harvest fruit every year, sometimes 2 times through the year, once a year, and you'll be getting some little money coming in. But if you cut a tree one off, everything gone. You just get a lump sum of money, a little bit of money, and that is it. So one of the things we're trying to see how we could help the mindset of my village and even other indigenous communities that do like harvesting, logging, to get the idea of letting the big trees, let the trees grow and use what we can use from the trees so we can combat with climate change within our village. Okay. So planting of the carbon trees for us in the village, what happened is we grew up from small. We normally in indigenous communities in our village, we do our traditional farming, which we clear the land, but then it takes years for trees to grow back. So where we be planting these carbon trees is within the place that we harvest out all our produce, and then just little fine trees live there. So we take the opportunity to replant these crab trees within the area, approximately like 2.5 acres we have with these crab trees that we put there within the area of our village.
Thank you, Loretta. I think for me, one of the big questions is, are you getting any government support to help you with these projects, or is it just women on their own in your village going out, helping each other out?
Yes, as women alone, we don't have any government support as yet. I would say as yet. But it's just we women in the village going about, and we come together, and this is what we see. So it's like with the only we asked forestry within this project that will liaison to help us to do some capacity building, within helping the Guyana forestry, right, to help the youth, because we have to work with the youth, right, to understand the reason of keeping the trees and looking at other resources that we can get from it, so we can go forward in maintaining the forests, and also protecting climate change within the area.
Yeah. Okay.
Because we have seen what has happened.
Are you back, Loretta? Do you want to finish that sentence? We didn't hear the last bit for
you. Okay, yes. I was saying that we have forestry on board, so we can do some training and capacity building with the youths. So let them see how we could get them to understand, to keep the forest standing and use some other resource from the same tree so they could maintain themselves in some ways, so that we could support within the climate change within our village.
That's wonderful. And I think that's a good segue here to our final speaker, because talking about involving the youth is something that our next speaker, Fiona Barreto, is very, very good at. She's the founder and director of African Malaika. She has an MBA and a master's in special education from Andrews University in Berrien Springs, Michigan. She's got more degrees than that, but I'm going to leave it at those two. She's the founder of the NGO African Malaika, which is a humanitarian organization which focuses on the empowerment of the world's underprivileged children through education. She introduces innovation, knowledge, education in science, technology, engineering, and maths, popularly known as STEM, to schools all over Tanzania, Malawi, Mozambique, China, and India. She also works tirelessly on mangrove restoration in Tanzania, and I know this because she regularly WhatsApps me images of what she's done, which is wonderful, using science and technology to monitor mangrove through school collaborations. And she's hoping to implement the use of drones in the future to look at more social science opportunities there. She's been a UN Goodwill Ambassador since Rio de Janeiro, and she has over 30 years' experience in helping Indigenous resilience. Currently, she's trying to empower women through these developments. This was all her idea, so let's hear from her now.
Thank you.
No worries.
Biodiversity ecosystem restoration. Mikoko Ujamaa is the name of the mangrove restoration, strengthening indigenous resilience, ecosystem restoration, and the role of traditional knowledge. Local Roots Global Branches is a research group from University of Edinburgh that helped us replicate Mikoko Pamoja's mangrove project. Invest in carbon blue forest initiatives in coastal woodland, land use and forestry, and not-lands. Invest in carbon blue forest for people and climate. Every dollar invested in restoration can yield $17 to $30 ton in benefits. The coastal fisheries occupy 89% of mangrove forest land, as is its home to approximately 8 million people in Tanzania. The main economic activity in fishing and mariculture entrepreneur. There is 48.1 million of hectares of forest woodland, not rangelands, and savanna subtropical. 2.3 million is of community-based farm management. Protecting and restoring 160,000 hectares of mangrove would be the best way to go. 1 million people, clean, safe, affordable drinking water, 600 of hectares of sequestering 44 million pounds of carbon dioxide from the air, 63,000 African households, the opportunity for education and healthcare, 9 million paid to farmers of organic honey in Africa, hundreds of thousands with the opportunity to align investments and purchases with other values. Protecting 1 hectare of mangrove with up to 1,100 tons of carbon. So one of our sites has 378 hectares. That would be 37,800 of benefits that they can help schools, the women, forest gardens, and things. So imagine if you have 100,000 hectares, 25 times more coral reef, fish, and threatened species, 1,079 tourism value per year, 50% it reduces the storm impacts. The types of restoration: sustainable forest, sustainable fuel wood, non-forest wood. The social impact is improved collectors' livelihood, environmental conservation, capacity building, financial literacy, sustainable tapping methods. Carbon credits is up to take 176,000 million on voluntary carbon markets. The innovation is value addition, oyster farming, cook stove making, conservation, mangrove tree regeneration, nursery planting, capacity building. Make a difference with women-led carbon forest projects, initiatives, gender equity and equality, that the next generation and the generation to come. We really are excited. COP26 brought in a lot of info and more into the finance. As I said, I've been 30 years from Rio de Janeiro doing adaptation and mitigation and natural-based solutions. The big piece, finance, and I was so happy to get partnered with Sophia from Jeffy. She is the COP26 programmer for the Global Economic Finance Initiative. So she brought in a lot of insight to me, and I had the pleasure to talk to the UNDP, and my role was to talk about finance. We need to unlock the finances and to support women, indigenous people on the ground, to spread the money and have the banks simplify the mechanism of finances. It's the bank now. It's not about natural-based solutions or mitigation. It's time for the finance, because if the mangrove dies, people die. So, and they need to spread that money amongst the micro, small, medium enterprises. And it was such a great pleasure working with Sophia. Thank you. She empowered us. The 6 weeks we gave her hell, and we apologize, but we made it. We empowered the young women and the youth. And yes, our going into this is a science-based thing. We want to live away with the traditional ways of monitoring mangrove. We want to use drones. We've already started to partner with the Abu Dhabi Carbon Blue Forest people, and COP26 gave us the opportunity to have a couple investors already, so we're very excited to get back to work come January. We have
I think we're going to make room for a question there, Fiona, because I love what you're saying. And I think just this afternoon, the First Minister of Scotland, Miss Nicola Sturgeon, actually did say that she thought it was a little bit shocking that in the last 15 years, since it was declared that $100 billion should be paid for climate mitigation and resilience to the developing nations from the developed nations, that we had still not paid that because it really isn't that much money and it's a drop in the ocean of what's needed. Now, we keep hearing from Indigenous women and peoples everywhere that they don't have access to the funding that we do here in the Global North, and I think that's a huge barrier to scaling up a lot of the work that you're doing and to protecting, again, bringing it back to Fanny's conversation about the security around doing this work and fighting against large industrial companies. So, and with that, Fanny, we've got a question. It's been posed to us in Spanish. I have to dig my Spanish out, so you'll have to forgive the pronunciation, but I think I understand it, so I'll quickly say it in English, and hopefully that will be enough for you. But it's, what are the principal obstacles in Colombia to conserve the Amazon? Is it the petrol industry, or is it the neoliberal political neoliberal political efforts and the economy? So I think if you want to read it in your native language, then I can let you answer that question. We can maybe put it on the screen for anyone at home so that my translation doesn't stay in your mind. Thank you very much.
Okay, gracias. Bueno, son muchos los obstáculos que hay en la para.
Well, there are many obstacles that we face when it comes to conserving the Amazon region. One, extractivism. Oil companies, mining companies, even fumigation and air fumigation with glyphosate, which damages ecosystems. We have actors who are acting illegally, who deforest the Amazon region, timber cutters. The Amazon is huge, it's extensive, and it's very difficult to control it all. Therefore, we need, for most Amazonic or territories in the Amazon, to be titled, because we are the ones that are able to preserve it, to conserve it. Now, so it's not just about mining companies, but it's also about government policies. There are areas in the Amazon where the Colombian state has not been able to reach with its policies. So some of these these lands, territories are abandoned. People are abandoned there. They have plenty of needs and face many obstacles, again, in the Amazon region, which is why women there have been said, we must be heard. We want to be heard. We want to work together with others, despite the obstacles, again, by people, by projects, by mega projects. Livestock farming that is reaching or has been coming to certain departments in the Amazon region. There is one legal case because of the sale of beef that is being sold without any control. So this is the international case that has been raised because they cannot destroy like that and create the deforestation just because they want to have livestock there. We can just deforest the Amazon region so that some are benefited. This should be about the common good. This should be a space that is good for the people at large, the entire planet, and all of us should take care of it. And there are other obstacles or barriers that we face, such as lack of policies, specific policies in terms of borders. We don't have a specific one on borders in our country, which creates for people from other countries to come in to steal natural resources from the Amazon region. So many problems we face there, but that's why we're there, saying now is time. It's a time, for women to raise our voices, to go deeper and say that together we're all going to build strategies to continue preserving the Amazon.
Yourself and in particular Loretta, who's joining us from Guyana, maybe just a quick question with regards to the announcements here at COP. We've seen over 100 nations sign up to an anti-deforestation pact, as it were. But this has been done before. We heard the Executive Director of the United Nations Environment Programme on Saturday, which was Nature Day, and she said time and time again, we've heard this since COP in Copenhagen and COP in Rio de Janeiro. So really what I would like to hear from yourself and Loretta, maybe in unison, are you feeling uplifted by these promises, or are you wondering, is it really going to happen? And maybe we can get Loretta to join us as well.
Positivas no hemos obtenido respuesta hasta el momento.
Well, positive, we haven't gotten a response, but we do feel positive that this may happen. And I'd like to make something very clear. The work that women in the Amazon region do, our constant restoration of the tropical rainforest to keep the climate equilibrium, which is the key role of the Amazon region as a regulator of climate. Because if we don't do this, that wouldn't work. Again, so that's why we are working, even if it's with small projects. One with the support of the national government with international cooperation, another one with an NGO such as Conservation International. And they have a fellows program, which is a recognition to that women, to indigenous knowledge holder women who know how to take care of the Amazon region. They have their own strategies. So these are small projects, but they're significant, and I believe they should be supported by everyone. So that's why we're creating the fund, to have our own funds to continue expanding these processes, which are effective. They're small, but they're very effective in the preservation, conservation, and restoration of the Amazon region.
And it maybe ties in a little bit with what you were saying, Fiona, earlier today, that you've actually benefited from COP. You've managed to raise some finance, you've managed to raise awareness, but then we are hearing on the other side, there's still a lot of people who are struggling to get a seat at the table. We've got a question here on the chat that we're going to pose at the very end, and I'd like to pose it to all four. So start thinking now about the message you have to share to COP leaders today. But I think really, if we bring it in, Fiona, to you, just in terms of this benefit that you've had from COP, do you think if COP had been more exclusive, that would have trickled down to a lot further, or have you just capitalized on the opportunity that you had? What do you think? Is there a concern that not enough Indigenous peoples and Indigenous women in particular are getting access to the conversations that are happening here at COP?
I would only say that I would think in the finance world, I think the Indigenous people are affected because of digitalization. If the Western world would digitalize South America, the African continent, and even America, if you try to transfer money by TransferWise, it took 2 weeks. So imagine the African countries don't have PayPal. So how are we going to pay the planters or the growers? So we have this gap, this ICT gap, that we really have to work hard. And every year we lose 200 million. So in 5 years, we lose 5.2 billion in just one city in Dar es Salaam. So we really need to speed up. We really need to involve all the youth. The youth are the Generation X. And, they are the goal. Snapchat, all this. We got to have this become a Cash App, Map, I don't know what app, this app. So we really need to digitalize the banking system. It needs to work so the indigenous people are not left out there in the forest just like, I have no hope.
So we have a bit of a complication with that. And if we still have Valentina on the line, obviously the Sami people are nomadic people, as she was explaining to us earlier. So if Valentina is with us, it would be interesting to hear if you're finding that digitalization would help or hinder your traditional culture.
Наша культура, она предполагает говорить о здоровье человека. А здоровье человека, оно же идет от того, что на Земле происходит. Если Земля не болеет, то и здоровье человека в целом сохраняется. К сожалению, не все я понимала, и у меня не было перевода, потому что оказалась программа
in general
не сошла, поэтому я очень надеюсь, что я
better shape. I wasn't understanding everything. I am not sure. Actually, I don't think I was able to connect to the interpretation, and that is the reason that I don't think I can answer your question.
Okay. That's not a problem, Valentina. I'm sorry that you had connection issues to the interpretation. But I think, and that's maybe a good example of what you were just saying there in person. If anyone in the room had any questions, now would be the time. We've got a few minutes left. Otherwise, we're going to throw it over to the online community. Now, please don't all fall over each other. There you go. Wonderful. Welcome. If you could just state your name, where you're from, and that would be love to hear from you.
All right. So my name is Sini Yakubu from Nigeria. Currently a student at the University of Glasgow here. So I've heard a lot from what is being said, especially when it comes to the issue of forests. My question goes directly to the EU, as especially about the tree that you spoke about, that is in, so what is EU actually doing in order to facilitate cross-learning? Because like in Nigeria, we have a lot of forests, but a lot of people are not interested in like replanting those trees because to some extent they don't have like direct economic value. For example, they don't produce fruit that are edible or can be used for other purposes, just as she stated. So what is EU doing in order to like ensure cross-learning or, if possible, cross-movement of seed, intercontinentally so that it can improve? Because if I'm a local farmer and I have access to this tree and it can grow in my community and give me like an immediate economic value, I will be more interested to plant the trees than to go and plant a tree that will give me economic value in the next 5-10 years.
Sure. And I think that, if I may, that's the big debate here about how do we encourage reforestation when you've got huge, like you would in Nigeria, population growth, and everyone needs to be fed. I think the EU as such is not represented on this panel, but they're kind enough to host us. I know that most of the EU countries, if I'm not mistaken, all EU countries have signed up for that COP26 pledge against deforestation by having deforestation by 2030. So I know that there is in the pipelines as well conversation about trade practices that are anti-deforestation as well. So, but I'll direct you to the EU specifically for that. And I think we've got time for just one very quick
comment on your question. The forests are there. The forest belongs to the government. So we have this problem now that people don't want to look after the forest because they don't get paid. So how are we going to come? So in order to be certified, we have Plan Vivo, for example. I've gone through Plan Vivo. Plan Vivo has to certify you that you have a joint forest management with the village. And then those credits will go to the village and they will protect the forest. So there has been this notion that, the government's not paying me, but UN comes in clean development management. So when they really know that it's certified and everything, then they come and you're certified, and then you get credits. So it's a long process. As I said, we are so far behind digitalization. So we got to move fast. If we don't, climate change is just going to be another 30 years we're just talking.
And with that, we are having to wrap up. I'm being given the signal from back. I'm so sorry. I'm going to encourage everyone in the room to stay behind and speak to our panelists, as it were, in person. And for those of you online, thank you for participating, staying with us this late evening, this late in COP. And thank you to the EU for hosting us on this platform. Thank you, Fiona. Thank you, Fanny. And online, thank you, Loretta and Valentina.
Thank you, Claude.
Thank you.
We can have a whole other conversation about